This is Kimberly Durden, and I'm here with author Brian Barnette, Stone Upon Stone, Brian's first published book. Author and illustrator. Wish you could see this. This is absolutely beautifully illustrated. But he's going to tell you a little bit about Stone Upon Stone. Brian, hope you're doing well.
I could not be better right now, so thank you.
You're at a place of peace that sometimes I need to be able to get to. Stone Upon Stone, what made you want to tell this story?
I grew up reading a lot, and I also wrote a lot, mostly poems and short stories and that kind of thing, but I always enjoyed writing notes and letters, anything to get feelings out on paper. I like to write. And this particular story came about completely as an emotional outlet. It was a catharsis for me. I'd had a falling out with a friend in a long-term friendship relationship. It was one of the times when I just retreated to my own imagination to get the feelings kind of like out. Honestly, this story, it completely, what I like to say, it downloaded like into my head. This was 25 years ago and I didn't even have a computer.
Wow.
I think I had like a small typewriter at the time.
Manual style?
Exactly. And literally just sat down and just started like typing out the story as it kind of came to me. It's changed very, very little since then, as far as maybe some grammatical changes and cleaning it up. But the story is now like it was then. It was a gift to me. And that's why sometimes when I talk about it, I'd like to say I'm very proud of it, and I am, but I am very grateful for it because it was a gift to me at a time when I needed that kind of catharsis and that kind of understanding.
That's a good word. That's a good word. Catharsis,
and that's exactly how I felt about it.
And healing, that's another thing that I got from it, even as I was trying to empty my mind and just read it again last night and saying, just let it hit me for the first time. And I think you already mentioned, because I was going to ask you, how close are you to this story? And you've kind of shared that, by it being a catharsis, because that word is so appropriate, it's very intimate with you. That's the sense that I'm getting.
It was exactly my emotional output at the time. It was what I was going through as far as the relationship and kind of understanding what, quote unquote, what happened to the relationship, why the separation, why the fight, why the argument, that kind of thing. So it is my story from that time.
And you hit on a point right there that I think touches everyone's life. And it depends on how well you do it as to how you can move forward. And that's when relationships end. How do you deal with it? What do we see very often in society? We see people who move on very quickly to the next one. But I think you said something that was really important, is to take time to think about what happened. Take time to think about, what went right, what went wrong. It's kind of like just, do you see that as important to be able to do?
Definitely reflection, because the older you get, I think, the more you realize that most relationships don't really end. You might not have processed where it is, but if you're carrying baggage from it, even if you never speak to the person again, the relationship is not ended. You're just carrying it on by yourself, somewhere in the back of your mind or in your emotions, or maybe you put it forward into your next relationship. So relationships transition for sure.
True.
For me, I feel like, but it is about a particular aspect of what happens to, I think, all of us in relationships, be it a romantic relationship, a familial relationship just among friends, even coworkers. This kind of dynamic is present, I think, a lot in our lives. And it was just a chance for me to look at it and think, okay, as it pertains to this particular time, what does this mean to me, even emotionally? What does it mean to me?
Okay. All right. So, and you did allude to the fact that this is a short story. It is illustrated. Each page of it is beautifully illustrated, absolutely captures your eye. But even as a short story, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something you can whip out in 30 minutes. So you mentioned that it actually started 25 years ago, but did it all come at one time? How long did it take you to get this story? How long was it in the making?
The story itself, I use the word downloaded because that's just the way it feels, is that the story just flowed out. But when I sat down and started writing it out, I was done in 20, 25 minutes. And that's a lot of times the way that I write. I had this impulse, if you will, and maybe one or two lines are stuck in your head. And as soon as I sit down and start committing to the expression of it, a lot of times it just flows right out. And this is one of those times where, again, that's why I use the word grateful. I'm very grateful that the story came to me in that way and it flowed out completely. And so say what you will. I don't know how better to describe it.
And I think what popped in my mind was the word purposeful. It wasn't sort of like, okay, well, I'm going to write and see what happens. And when you say the word download, I mean, there's definitely a process. It's in there. I remember for my own experience when I was younger and I would write poetry, I used to tell people it literally feels like there's a knot in my chest. And until I get all of the words out, that knot's going to be there. And I know when I've come to the end because I feel that knot release.
Perfect. Exactly. And
so you know kind of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Oh.
When you're sitting, if you're mulling over a problem or a challenge or whatever it is, I think a lot of times we could all relate to the fact that you know that your subconscious is going over and over and over. And even though your conscious mind is being occupied with day-to-day activities, whether it's work or whatever it is, you know that something in you is still processing these emotions.
Right.
And I got to that point, like you called it the knot, I just called it the impulse that I had to sit down and get it out. I had to express it somehow. Obviously, if you can't talk to the person, if you're having a disagreement, then I had to get it out for myself. And that's the way I did it, was writing.
Well, and you mentioned something else that kind of caught me there, that 25 years ago. So you had the story 25 years ago. What's happened in 25 years? Why is it being released this month? What happened in 25 years? What held it there? Or I guess my way of looking at it is did you have to overcome something to get to this place, to today, to this book being published?
I used to say I have stacks of poems and writings. Now it's computer files, but I've got so many writings that they were just for me. That was from my outlet, and I got them down, got them out. Same way with this story. I didn't illustrate it at first. The story itself just came out, and it was just like 2 pages long. And I felt comfortable with the fact that, okay, it was out. I felt good about it, and I liked the story. So I did share it with a few friends from time to time. They were always complimentary on the story. Oh, that's nice, that's sweet. But I didn't originally at first intend to publish it. It was more for me. It was just cathartic. It was my, enjoying myself in that capacity that I'm just writing out my feelings. And it went into the back of my closet into a drawer. Every now and then I would pull it out. There were times in the past 25 years when I thought, you know what, I'd like to be a writer. If you ask me, like, what is your dream job? One of them would have been to be a writer. And I would pull it out and think, how could I get this published? But living where I did at the time in Florida, it wasn't like you could walk down the street and go into several different publishing houses. You couldn't. That's a New York type thing when you think of it, it's the industry. So at that time, I didn't have the resources. Probably about 4 or 5 years after the fact that I wrote it, I decided to illustrate it. I'm not a great illustrator. My drawings are very simplistic. They're childlike. But I wanted to create like a storyboard for the story itself, the action, what was taking place. The drawings, again, were very simple. And I thought I was going to go to one of my other friends who was an artist to say, hey, let's collaborate, see if we could make this into a book. That never panned out, but I kept my original drawings. And when my friends or family or people would see them, they would say, oh, that's great, though, they fit. And then one friend actually said, that looks like a Shel Silverstein book. And I had been familiar with Shel Silverstein. Well, yes. I think most of us in our age or our generation probably were familiar with Where the Sidewalk Ends or Light in the Attic, the collection of poems. I was not at the time familiar with the books The Missing Piece or the Rolling O book. So when he mentioned that, I went straight to the bookstore and started looking them up. And again, very simplistic drawings, stick figure-y type childlike drawings, but the story were very powerful. The stories were very meaningful. So I felt that that's a great comparison. I was kind of flattered after seeing it that, wow, that somebody thought of that. I felt like, okay, maybe in this fashion, in this form, the way I've illustrated it, maybe it can be something that people would enjoy. And that was, again, about, I guess, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I decided that, okay, I'm going to try to start looking for a publisher. I think most people who want to be a writer realize that you either had to have an agent to get published, or you had to be published to get an agent. It was difficult. I would send actually the manuscript out to agents and to publishers, not knowing anything other than the fact that in my mind I wanted to find a way to publish it. And I would get really strongly worded letters back advising me to do more research on what they published or who they represented. So in my advice to anybody else trying to get published, I would say just make sure that the agent that you want to send it to represents your type of work, or make sure the publishing house you want to send it to publishes your kind of work.
I've heard that. And I think that is good advice. To the book itself, when I saw this, and having been a former educator, I absolutely fell in love with what I saw as the allegorical quality of the story. It's so it could be any man's story, any woman's story.
I'm a big fan of so many incredible artists and illustrators, and I've been lucky enough to have met a lot of really talented artists of all kinds. I guess for me, I feel like the illustrations that did come to me, they do not overpower the story at all. So I'm very happy with the way that it has turned out. Proud that the illustrations themselves are part of the story now. So,
and I think they're true to the original intent. You're able to say, yes, this is just the way that I wanted it. Did you plan for it to be an allegory?
I'd like to say that there was some overall artistic creative scheme, but it just kept coming to me. It's very lyrical. I did write a lot of poems by myself, and I enjoyed contemporary type poetry. So the way that it came, it feels very lyrical. It came out in that fashion, and I'm happy with it. I don't know that it was planned. It was just in my mind, in my emotions. That's how it felt.
Okay, so you used the word lyrical, and I did note that it did seem to have a poetic quality. This is something that I noticed even with repeating of lines, and I think you kind of answered this, and I was going to ask, do you consider this book to be poetry?
In a larger sense, I think that it is very poetic in the way that it is presented, the way that it came to me, and the way that it's read, I guess, in a way. It's simple stanzas, it's simple lines. It kind of takes you somewhere, and not an overpowering fashion. It's not judgmental. It's more like a gentle overview or a gentle experience of what happens between these two souls in this book. And
you repeat a line, the paths in life are seldom straight or fixed.
As far as the story goes and the allegory, that is something that is a point to be made, is that the paths in life are seldom straight or fixed. As much as I'd like to plan my life, it doesn't always go according to plan, so things happen and you go with the flow. It's never like a straight shot from here to there. There's a million different variables, So
I do have to agree with that one, and I think that our inner joy comes from how we deal with the fact that our plans don't always go according to form. There's a point in the book where the title, the stones are an important part of the story. What do you mean by stones?
The story is about two souls who meet on their paths in life and decide to spend some of their time together, walking together. And the stones that end up in their path are metaphors, but if you have enough of these stones in your way or in your path, it's not an easy walk. And the way that they use the stones is that the stones end up becoming a barrier between them for a time. The title Stone Upon Stone, it was already in my mind, that metaphor, because in my life I felt like it was that metaphor.
Would you care to share any stones that you've in life?
Well, anything that's an impediment to being authentically you or honest and open in a relationship, I think would be detrimental to the relationship. I mean, the obvious things are lying, cheating, betrayal, anger. Those seem obvious impediments to relationships.
But I didn't take it that's what you were going after, was the obvious from the story.
Well, and they're also maybe they're well-intentioned. Like if you withhold some part of you, some part of your truth, in order to try to make somebody else feel better, you're not giving them the full experience of you. If you don't give them the honest reflection of their behavior, you're not allowing them the opportunity maybe to grow or to, and I'm not saying point out faults, I'm just saying that being honest, having integrity with your feelings, having compassion and understanding of their feelings, but you don't dumb it down. You don't withhold your light to make somebody else feel better in any situation. You're honest. It's a sharing. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy for real, because otherwise we'd all be doing it. But
yeah, that's true.
It is one of those things that the stones or the impediments to relationship might be anything that prevents you from being honest and authentic, or that you put in somebody else's way from allowing them to be honest and authentic. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I think, like you said, there could be obvious things, but I definitely got the sense that we weren't talking about the obvious. It was those things that, like you said, may have started out to be well-intentioned things. And you mentioned this was just for you. Once you decided that you were going to publish, how did you see your audience? Is it for everybody? Did you have a specific group in mind?
When I would share the story with friends, a lot of times, again, they would be complimentary, and then I would get a call or a request back. Someone would say, "Hey, your story that you wrote, I have been having a fight with this person or that person. I've been arguing with this friend or that friend, or I've had a falling out with my mother, brother, sister, whoever. Can I share that story with them?" And
wow.
I started seeing it actually being used as this kind of tool that people would say they've had a disagreement in a relationship and they wanted to heal it somehow, or they wanted to maybe regain the communication or open up the dialogue. And so I would say, sure, here. And I would either make copies of it, or as technology progressed, I would email them and just say, sure, share it with them. That made me think that, okay, again, there is an audience for it. It does reach people. It didn't just help me. It evidently can be a help to somebody else. So I thought, let me see how I can get this out there, get this published. So I would say the target audience really is any age, really,
okay.
and any person. And it is simply, I look at it more as a book that you wouldn't necessarily buy the book to keep yourself. The story, I hope, touches you in a way that you automatically think of one or two people in your life that you would want to share that story with, that says to them, it's not an apology. When I think forgiveness is necessary, it's not because maybe you did something wrong. A lot of times I think in relationships, when you've had that disagreement, I don't need you to tell me that you're sorry that you did something, as much as I would like to hear, I'm sorry that you were hurt.
Right.
You want to be validated for your feelings, that it didn't go the way that everybody wanted, and maybe you got hurt, and it would be so nice to have just the other person acknowledge the fact that, you know what, it didn't feel good. My feelings got hurt, my emotions were involved, my heart got broken. And that's how I see this being used as a story, is that if you know somebody in your life, that it doesn't mean you're going to invite them to lunch, and it doesn't mean you're going to start hanging out and being best friends, but you want to honor the fact that your relationship was integral to your life, it was important, it helped you, and you honor that. And I think this story does that. So that audience, which I think is everybody, is who I'm after.
I think that you've touched on what should be, acknowledge the fact that my feelings are valid. It doesn't mean that we're getting back together or we're going to buddy up. Just, we're going to acknowledge that this was good for a time, that something happened, and you can be just honest. Just very raw and honest about that. And I think that's such a good place to get to.
I'm not discounting the fact that some people probably will betray you. Some people will hurt you. Some people are toxic in your life, and maybe they should not be in your life. This is not, again, it's not a judgment story. It's a story about, okay, the time we spent together, some part of it was very important, obviously.
Right.
And that's what I'm honoring.
Right. And that's what I love about it. What makes it exceptional is I feel that there is no judgment. It's just well put in a beautiful way. The language is beautiful, and it just truly, truly goes straight to the heart. I want to give you 3 quotes. I'd like to know if we could sum it up in someone else's words, if someone maybe has touched on it, maybe how we could express that. Winston Churchill said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Only in the darkness can you see the stars." And then from singer Winona Judd, "To heal from the inside out is the key." Which one touches the story?
Well, I think, again, all three are great quotes. I would not say the Churchill because I don't want it to feel like relationships are hell. They're not. They can be of our own making, and I love the quote from Dr. King because it's almost like the Talmud has a line that says, in the time of the darkest night, act as if morning has already come. So I love the fact that in the darkness you can see the stars. So Dr. King quote's great. Winona, I think, is incredible lyricist. So I would say somewhere between Dr. King's and Winona's, or one that maybe I would choose also comes from the Course in Miracles, is that only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. So it's about that being authentically yourself in relationships. But while something is happening, there's still reason enough to be thankful and grateful and not lose hope necessarily. I love good quotes, so yeah, exactly.
And I love them too. I really do, and I think that and they give us something to think about, and we can usually grab something and kind of expand on it. I think that I would say my bottom line is you will know once you get this that it is a book for sharing. So there's someone in your life you will want to share the story with. It is not something you can hold and keep to yourself.
Once you read the story and you kind of understand, it's almost like a realization that you want to share with them, but it might be a realization that you understand finally yourself. It may be that quiet thing inside of your mind that says, despite all of my behavior, despite what's happened, despite where I'm at, or despite where you're at, or any of it, the honest truth is to know that it's that kind of wake-up call for yourself. It's that kind of wake-up call that you want to tell them about, and it's an emotional impact that I think a realization, that's what we'd hope for in a realization, is to realize that no matter what's happened between us, that's the truth of it. And again, we might not be friends anymore, we might not be in the same state, we might not be in the same life anymore, but that realization that while we were together, the time we spent together, the road we shared, you look back and you honor it with the fact that, you know what, as good as I could, I loved you. As well as I could, I loved you.
Tough
I think
part.
in every relationship. I mean, I certainly have had friendships that ended, not the word I'd use. I've had friendships that are not ongoing right now, that I felt completely betrayed. I felt completely used or put upon. But there are two stories there. There's their side and there's my side. So even though I know how it feels for me, I can only look back and get some kind of healing from myself by realizing that, you know what, the truth of it is still that I cared about that person. The truth of it is still that, you know what, I hope I did my best, and I hope I'll do better now by honoring that part of the relationship, by honoring that part of the journey. Well, another great quote from Dr. Maya Angelou is, when you know better, you do better. And I would say, hopefully, you allow yourself to know better. Something might feel like, okay, that's over. Well, that part is over. That part has finished. That part has ended. But now, if you allow yourself to be better, to be different, and again, then a quote from A Course in Miracles is, be determined to be not as you were. So
I like that.
I'm opening myself up to the fact that if that meant anything, I had better learn from it. And so while that part may be finished, then maybe something is cracked open and now I can have a better relationship, or the relationship I'm in now will be better because of my understanding of that relationship and how that relationship transpired. Ending, beginning, over, it's all semantic depending upon how you look at it. And as long as I am on this side of the dirt, I hope that it's something that I can use to become a better person and have better relationships. And that relationship will impact this relationship. This relationship will impact that relationship. And it's an ongoing, thank God, never-ending cycle.
Where do you see yourself going from here? What does the future hold after Stone Upon Stone?
Onward and upward. I do have other stories. I've written a few children's stories that I've not completely illustrated, but I've got some sample illustrations, and I'd like to have them published. I'm working on a novel still, and I might always have ideas, screenplays, just different kinds of ways to get stories out there to engage and entertain, and get people to come together, communicate, and share thoughts, feelings, and emotions and experiences. So, Stone Upon Stone, read it. I know that you'll think of somebody in your life to whom this applies. Don't waste that emotion or that impulse. Is somehow reach out and find the good feeling place of a relationship that maybe you didn't think had one. I know it has one.
Where can we get the book?
Well, I know if you go to Peak City Publishing, it'll have information for my book, Peak City Publishing, P-E-A-K, like the peak of a mountain, peakcitypublishing.com, and you can find information about my work. If my story helps anybody at all, I would never tire of hearing the fact that it's been instrumental that way, because, again, I'm very, very grateful that the story came to me.
Go to peakcitypublishing.com, and after you've gotten your copy of it, after you've read it, and maybe after you've shared it, then contact Brian Barnette there through the link there on their site and share some of what it meant to you, because I will truly say it's going to have a unique meaning for each reader. It's going to touch some part of your life, but no matter what it is, it will fit. This wonderful book is written and illustrated by Brian Barnette, and a portion of proceeds go to the very wonderful Trevor Project. Get more information about this. Go to Peak City Publishing online, check it out, and then get your copy today. Brian, thanks so much.